Now, I don't know if you all remember, but there was a time, more than a few years ago, where you could go to the cinema and not have to worry about whether you were going to miss one last scene if you had to dash before the credits were over. Once those names started rolling, generally that was them. And some of the ones we're about to highlight, well, they range from bad to pretty WTF-inducing. This is Whatculture, and here are huge WTF movie post-credits moments.
Chaz Reborn, Constantine. Before Matt Ryan brought the character to life as part of the CW's Arrowverse, John Constantine was portrayed by Keanu Reeves back in 2005 in an outing that pitted the Demon Slayer against some of the biggest names in the book. After offing Balthazar, Constantine went head-to-head with Mammon, the son of the devil who was being summoned by Gabriel. However, during the final battle, John's apprentice, Chaz, was killed by the latter. Shia LaBeouf's Chaz has a limited role in the story, but was brought from the bench into the game to help in the fight against Mammon. He was incredibly book-smart on the kinds of wars Constantine waged, but real life was very different from the books. The very first time he was brought into the fold, he was killed. Still, that is absolutely not where his story ended. In a post-credit stinger, Constantine visited Chaz's grave, only to see the young man emerge from the ground, sprouting glorious, brilliant white wings in the fashion of Gabriel before she was made mortal by Lucifer. John didn't seem too shaken by this development, but most people watching would have been. It was a tease for a potential sequel that never happened, with Chaz now being one of the half-breeds John spent his life fighting.
A scrapped musical number, Renfield. Throughout a long and successful career that has even seen the man win Best Actor at the 1996 Academy Awards, Nicolas Cage is well and truly back in the big time. Pig, my favorite movie of 2022. Dream Scenario, also brilliant. One of the lowlights of the Cage renaissance, though, was Renfield, where instead of getting to put his acting chops to the test in a production that took Dracula seriously, he instead had to ham it up in a weirdly sludgy superhero-adjacent comedy. It's not without its charm, like a sort of pre-flamed up Flaming Moe, but at this stage in his career, Cage deserved the chance to do a proper Dracula movie. One thing that sort of functions like a Lost highlight, though, came up in Renfield's end credits, which showed certain scenes that were left on the cutting room floor. In particular, homages paid to previous cinematic incarnations of Count Dracula, but among them is a shot of Renfield seemingly leading a dance troupe in what was ultimately a musical number cut from the movie. The full sequence has been posted to Twitter by Nicholas Hoult himself, and as you can see, the actor seemed to be having the time of his life throwing his everything into the scene. A damn shame it was relegated to a mere hint in the credits and didn't appear in the movie proper.
A fourth wall break, Jingle All the Way. Arnold Schwarzenegger may be one of the most recognizable names in the movie industry. The star of the likes of Predator, Terminator, Total Recall, and other huge blockbusters. But he also starred in what is one of the most popular Christmas films, even now, almost 30 years after its release. As Howard Langston in Jingle All the Way, Arnie played an absent father who had to go through hell and back on Christmas Eve to find his son the toy he so desperately wanted, a Turbo Man action figure. Howard was never the most attentive father, and he had forgotten to buy the toy weeks earlier when it would have been readily available. But of course, it wouldn't be a feel-good Christmas movie if there wasn't ultimately a happy ending. Now, this may have been undone slightly by the post-credits scene in which Liz, Howard's wife, asked what he got her for Christmas. Turns out, he forgot about a gift for her too. The concept of the scene isn't particularly noteworthy. It's all about Arnie's fantastically corny look to the camera. What a way to break the fourth wall.
A confusing cameo. Morbius. Though it may have been overtaken by Madam Web as the laughingstock of Sony's Spider-Man universe, make no mistake, Morbius was ripped to shreds online like few other movies had ever been before. It was bad from the very start, right to the very end, and even beyond, with Sony even re-releasing the film later in the year after misreading ironic praise for the film online as genuine. By the time the credits rolled on Morbius, audiences had been taken through a weak story led by a poor main character, but arguably the worst thing came after, and man, I am sorry for the second-hand cringe I'm about to transfer to you all, because it never gets easier having to recap this quote-unquote movie. Seemingly as part of Doctor Strange's spell that brought the Spider-Man universes together in Spider-Man No Way Home, Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes was sent across to Michael Morbius' world, though nowhere was it ever explained why anyone left the MCU, rather than actually was taken there. It's just... why? Anyway, poor old Michael Keaton's Vulture sorts out Morbius to quote-unquote team up in what was one of the most poorly written, lazily pieced together post-credit scenes that has ever been put to screen. It made no sense. Not in the least because Morbius had been portrayed as more of an anti-hero than a villain until this moment, and it was obviously there just for the sake of it being there. What's even worse with this is that Toomes' appearance had already been shown to everyone as part of the film's trailer. Just incredible bro thinks he's on the team energy from one of our most endearingly cringe franchises.
A new god, Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. The Pirates of the Caribbean franchise has always been heavily peppered with the eccentric, the bombastic, and the downright unbelievable. From deadly curses and tentacle-faced men, to literal gods and the half-drunk madness that is so vital to Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow as a character. Belief has to be suspended when watching. However, even in a world of ghost stories and the very real concept of eternal life and immortality, there are moments that can take an audience back more than others. During the events of Dead Man's Chest, Captain Jack found himself imprisoned by a cannibalistic tribe that viewed him as some sort of deity, but only so long as he acted as such. He was always just one mistake or a misstep away from being killed and eaten. As such, when he made his escape, he was chased as far as the ship, but while he and his crew made it away from the island unscathed, their trusty dog, who always kept a ring of keys in his mouth, fell behind. Well, what exactly did the tribe do to the dog? All is revealed in the post-credits scene. They replaced the keys with a bone and made him their new god.
Is Argylle real or not? Argylle. There are plenty of words you could use to describe Matthew Vaughn's Argylle, and while flop may be the one that immediately comes to mind, perhaps a more telling adjective would be confusing. This was compounded by the post-credit scene, which really didn't make much sense at all. The story of the film follows Henry Cavill's Agent Argylle, though it is ultimately revealed that he is a work of fiction brought to life by Bryce Dallas Howard's Rachel Kyle. Kyle was the true Argylle, as her novels based around the character came from her own suppressed memories from when she herself was a spy. Think The Long Kiss Goodnight, just not good. This was confusing enough as it was, and arguably may have played a role in very few people actually going to see the film. But things only got worse after the credits. This took what was already a hard-to-follow movie and threw another twist in there to make it damn near incomprehensible. At a book event based around her latest novel, a man who looked exactly like Argylle, of course also played by Henry Cavill, revealed himself, much to Rachel's horror, and asked if she had any questions for him. So, was Argylle real? Was Argylle not real? Who was this guy? Based on the box office figures, we can safely say that these are questions that will likely never be answered.
Maggie Speaks, the Simpsons movie. The Simpsons has been a staple of TV and pop culture for over 3 decades. And so when the family was brought to the big screen in 2007, it was a big deal. Even by that point, the show was past its prime. But that didn't stop the hype around the film. It was a fun outing, better than much of what was being released on TV around it, and was received generally positively. There's been a running joke through The Simpsons that Maggie has never spoken. Even in glimpses of the future, she either still has her dummy in or is always getting cut off before she can speak. Though there was one heartwarming moment in season 4 where she called Homer Daddy, that's been about it in terms of speaking for Maggie. During the credits of the movie, as the family was leaving the cinema, Maggie removed her iconic dummy and posed the question, Garfield 3 press junket, Zombieland double tap. One of the funniest moments of Zombieland, and there are a lot to pick from, came when Columbus killed Bill Murray. The legendary actor had figured out that he could survive if he pretended to be one of the undead, but his disguise was so good that Jesse Eisenberg's character panicked and shot him dead. This became a running joke through the sequel, with the term Murraying someone being coined off the back of what happened. With the credits coming to an end on Zombieland Double Tap, Columbus's voiceover spoke of the guilt he felt for killing the original Ghostbuster, and so he presented the gift of the Garfield 3 Flabby Tabby press junket. Murray has never been shy of his disdain for the Garfield franchise, and this was referenced in the original Zombieland movie, but the sequel's post-credit sting took it to a whole new level. Of course, in reality, there was never a third Garfield outing, but in universe, this was because the whole zombie epidemic kicked off at the junket thanks to one of his interviewers, Al Roker. From there, after professing how much he hated the movie, he nonchalantly went around dispatching just about every zombie he could see. Dead characters are brought back far too often on the big screen, but this was an example of how to do it perfectly.
Shooting Ryan Reynolds in the head. Deadpool 2. Ryan Reynolds has never been afraid of poking fun at both himself and the roles he has played in the past. One of the latter that he has been the most vocally critical about is his turn as Hal Jordan in Green Lantern, an opinion shared by the majority of people who went to see it. But anyway, the reboot of Deadpool allowed Reynolds to bring a lot of his personality into the fourth wall-breaking franchise, and the post-credit scene took full advantage of that. After fixing Cable's time-traveling device, Wade went back in time to save the lives of Vanessa and his old X-Force teammate Peter, shoot the previous version of Wade that was a far cry from everything that made Deadpool great, and, bizarrely, to kill Ryan Reynolds before being able to star in Green Lantern. Deadpool has done a lot of outrageous things in his two movies, but seeing Reynolds' own blood spatter across the Green Lantern script sits atop the list of the most hilarious.
The entire Multiverse of Madness trailer, Spider-Man No Way Home. Though the franchise certainly didn't create the concept of the post-credit scene, the MCU brought the trend to the forefront of Hollywood, and is arguably the reason why more films than ever finish with either a post or mid-credit sting in the current climate. Many of these scenes have been in order to tease what is to come in the future from Marvel Studios. Sometimes it's a character appearance, a glimpse of what happened next, or even a scene lifted straight from the next movie set to release. In 2021, Spider-Man No Way Home may have broken the internet with its live-action Spider-Verse, but it certainly lost a lot of creativity points when it came to the post-credit scene. The second one, at least. After teasing Eddie Brock's brief holiday to Earth 616, instead of a mere hint at what was to come from the MCU, there was instead a fully fledged trailer for the next installment in the franchise, something that had never been done before. In years gone by, this would have been something smaller, something like a strange variant reveal, or hell, they could have even spoiled Professor X's involvement here instead of a later trailer release. At least this would still have given those in the audience an "oh my god" moment rather than a 2-minute trailer that could have been released at any time.
An Unbreakable sequel. Split. It's common knowledge that M. Night Shyamalan loves to shock audiences with a huge surprise twist out of absolutely nowhere. From Bruce Willis being dead in The Sixth Sense to Elijah Price being the villain of Unbreakable, and so on and so forth. Sorry if I spoiled both of those for you, but it's been like 25 years. Come on, get with the times. It seemed at first, however, that the director broke his tradition with Split in 2016. The film that followed James McAvoy as Kevin Wendell Crumb and his 23 alternate personalities, in what is a terrific, criminally underrated performance, seemingly finished without the usual twist. However, there was one more still to come, just slightly later than expected. After seeing the title of the film appear in huge letters, viewers were immediately taken to another scene set in a diner with the story of Crumb playing on the news. The twist? Well, without warning, Bruce Willis reprises his role as David Dunn from Unbreakable, which had released 16 years previously. As a group of people watching the report compared Crumb to Elijah Price, the camera panned to Dunn, names dropping Samuel L. Jackson's Mr. Glass from Unbreakable, and confirming that Split had been a secret sequel all along. In a world where the internet has made it almost impossible to keep leaks from happening, this scene dropped jaws and was arguably one of the best Shyamalan twists ever put to screen.
Django appears A Million Ways to Die in the West. Seth MacFarlane's first move from TV to the big screen came in 2014 with his directing debut, A Million Ways to Die in the West. It's what you'd expect from the man. Much of the humour familiar to fans of Family Guy and American Dad, with plenty of jokes that seem to stretch on for too long. A trademark of MacFarlane's cartoons. What the movie also had in abundance was cameo appearances. Ewan McGregor and Ryan Reynolds showed their faces, while Christopher Lloyd even showed up as Doc Brown in a mad crossover with Back to the Future. However, this wasn't even the most surprising crossover the film could boast. A lot of important things happened during the Old Stump Fair, and the gathering was revisited after the end title card and again after the credits had finished. You could have had a million guesses as to who would have showed up here, but Jamie Foxx as Django likely wouldn't have been one of them. Reprising the role he played for Quentin Tarantino in Django Unchained 2 years earlier, Foxx came to the fair and shot the owner of the runaway slave shooting game, reiterating the message from throughout the film that people die at the fair. A wordless cameo from Ryan Reynolds was one thing, but this was something else entirely.
Tommy Wiseau's contractual obligation, the disaster artist. The Room, written, directed, and starring the eccentric and unmistakable Tommy Wiseau, is widely regarded as one of the worst movies of all time. Even The Disaster Artist, the on-screen depiction of the making of Wiseau's picture, had a fittingly ridiculous behind-the-scenes story. For all intents and purposes, James Franco's movie is a pretty good one. Certainly better than its subject, but there was one scene that could have threatened it entirely. Namely, the contractually obligated cameo from Wiseau himself, which he insisted on having opposite Franco. The problem was that the man is instantly recognizable, and to have him face to face with Franco playing him would make absolutely no sense at all. But of course, Wiseau wouldn't be denied in spite of the many objections he heard. The scene, which has absolutely no place within the movie or the overall narrative, sees the real Wiseau in a painfully poor disguise, having a nonsensical conversation with his James Franco counterpart about absolutely nothing of any degree of importance. It would have literally killed any momentum the film had picked up dead, and though Franco was contractually obliged to include it in the film, he literally hid it at the very end.
Did Kobas survive Dawn of the Planet of the Apes? While Rise of the Planet of the Apes sowed the seeds for the ultimate war between humans and apes for the fate of the planet, the second movie in the franchise, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, brought civil war to Caesar's ranks. One of Caesar's most trusted allies, Kobas, felt his leader was being too soft on humans, and led something of a revolt, ultimately leading to his own death. Apes were not supposed to kill other apes, but Caesar was responsible for Kobas' death after proclaiming that he was no ape. Caesar let go of Kobas' hand and watched him plummet so far that he was out of sight when he landed. As the credits rolled towards their end, however, audiences could hear what would seem to be rubble shifting and an ape panting and breathing. This was unmistakably the sound of Kobas getting up. The villain was an integral part of the story, as it was his actions that escalated the fight between humans and apes to an all-out war. To bring him back would have made sense, and on its own, there's nothing particularly strange about the tease at the end of the credits, until the third movie came and went without it being addressed in the slightest. So what was the point of the tease then?
Introducing Hitler, the King's Man. Oh, I cannot believe I've had to say that entry heading out loud. What a time. But let's get into it, shall we? It was Nick Fury's emergence in Iron Man that began cinema's obsession with post-credit scenes, but almost just as influential was the reveal of Thanos as the MCU's big bad at the end of the Avengers 4 years later. The post-credit scene became a viable way to tease a bigger villain down the line, and while some movies have taken it and used it well, others, well, took it too far, arguably none more so than The King's Man. The prequel to Matthew Vaughn's Kingsman franchise saw the establishment of the titular intelligence agency as Orlando Oxford, played by Ralph Fiennes, and Shola, played by Jimon Hounsou, shared their story with several characters from real-life history, including Rhys Ifans' Grigory Rasputin and Tom Hollander's triple role as King George V, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and Tsar Nicholas II. How could this be topped? Well, how about a Thanos-esque reveal of an even greater villain from the realms of reality? The King's Man introduced to the franchise Adolf Hitler, played by David Cross, like he was the Mad Titan himself, as the next big bad the King's Men would inevitably have to take down. But in doing so, this film broke the cardinal rule of cinema, which is Don't introduce Adolf Hitler like he's some kind of comic villain who first appeared in the pages of Spectacular Drek number 134. Or try and do the whole weird grand conspiracy thing with the worst genocidal tyrants of the 20th century. Stupid, hilarious, an affront to taste itself. It's gonna take a lot for any post-credits scene to get this bad or cursed ever again.
A Game Boy cheat code, Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. Scooby-Doo is one of the most globally famous and iconic, not only cartoon characters, but pop culture figures of all time. Since debuting in 1969, there have been TV shows, movies, crossovers, comics, video games, and many, many more appearances. In 2002 came the James Gunn-written Scooby-Doo the Movie, starring the flawless casting of Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, Linda Cardellini, and Matthew Lillard as Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shaggy, respectively. 2 years later, the sequel was released, along with a tie-in video game for the Game Boy Advance and PC. Now, these days, anyone can go on the internet and relatively easily find out just about every detail about any video game they could possibly want. But back in the early 2000s, it wasn't so easy. Luckily, Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed had a post-credits scene that offered gamers a secret code. Scoob appeared after the credits had finished rolling to reveal the unbelievably unoriginal code SD2. If entered on the Game Boy Advance, this would reveal who the culprit was, while on the PC, it would unlock a mini-game, Dance the Fright Away. This is how you reward those who stay to the end, even if it would only benefit a small number of them who actually played the game.